Welcome, sleepy traveler. You've arrived at a quiet space made just for you. My name is Valarie, and I am here to guide you gently into rest, to help ease your mind, soften your body, and drift you toward a peaceful, uninterrupted sleep. Whether your day was long or your thoughts feel a little too loud tonight, let this be your permission to slow down, to breathe, and to simply be. There's nothing more to do now. Just allow my voice to be your guide as we begin this gentle journey toward deep, nourishing rest. If you're new here, subscribe for sleep content like this, and like this video if you find it enjoyable. Welcome to tonight's gentle sleep meditation. This video will include a short guided sleep story to make sleeping truly a beautiful journey. You are here now, and that is more than enough. You've chosen to take this moment for yourself, to rest, to breathe, to let go. Let the world soften behind you. The to-do lists, the thoughts, the echoes of the day, they can all wait. This is your time to gently return to yourself, to slow down, to reconnect, to simply be. You're not here to perform. You're not here to figure anything out. You're just here to rest. Let your body feel supported by wherever you are. Whether you're lying in bed on a couch or nestled under a blanket, you are safe and you are held. Notice the contact between your body and the surface beneath you. Let it hold you fully. Let yourself surrender. There's nothing else you need to do right now. Just breathe. Inhale slowly through your nose, gentle, deep, unforced. Now exhale with ease, like a wave returning to the sea. Let's do that again together. Inhale. Hold it gently. And exhale. With every breath, your body begins to soften. Your shoulders gently release. Your jaw relaxes. Your hands become light. Your breath is your guide tonight. A soft rhythmic tide that carries you towards stillness. Let each exhale be a tiny letting go of tension, of thought, of noise. You are not alone here. These words are a quiet companion, whispering peace into your evening. If your mind wanders, that's perfectly okay. Just gently come back to your breath, back to the rhythm of ease. The day has done what it could. Now it's time for rest. Feel the gentle pull of gravity as you sink deeper into comfort. Like a stone resting on the riverbed. There is nowhere to be. Nothing to fix. You are already whole. Allow your awareness to drift now. Like clouds floating across a quiet sky. Soft and unhurried. Loose and untethered. You might begin to notice a spaciousness within you. A gentle openness. There's a quiet wisdom in stillness. A remembering that you are enough. Let your breath remind you that even in this moment of doing nothing, you are still loved. You are still worthy. Allow the sounds around you to become part of your experience. There's no need to resist them. Let them pass like waves. And if silence finds you, welcome it like an old friend. This space is yours. It's soft. It's quiet. It's kind. As you begin to drift towards sleep, allow my voice to fade into the background. Let the words blur gently into your dreams. There's no need to hold on. No need to stay alert. Sleep will come in its own time, like twilight slipping into dusk. You are safe to let go. You are safe to rest. Allow your awareness to float like a feather, light and effortless, carried by the breeze of your breath. And in this moment, let yourself be still, held by the night, cradled by the quiet. With every exhale, a little more tension leaves your body. With every breath, peace enters. Feel your toes soften. Your legs unwind. Your belly settles. Your chest loosens. Your heart slows. Everything is slowing down, becoming quieter, becoming softer. Let this be your gentle entry into sleep, a welcome passage into dreams. Even if sleep doesn't come right away, trust that your body is resting. Your nervous system is calming. Your mind is unwinding. This time is never wasted. Rest is sacred. Stillness is healing. You are doing beautifully. Simply by being here. If you've found peace in this meditation, I gently invite you to like, comment, or subscribe. Your support allows this space of rest to grow. Now let's return to stillness. Feel the breath once more. Soft, even, kind. Let each breath be a lullaby. Each exhale a release. As you sink into sleep, know that you are held in quiet grace. There is nothing more you need to do. You are allowed to rest. You are meant to rest. The night welcomes you. The stars keep watch. The earth cradles your dreams. Allow yourself to drift, to dissolve into softness, to melt into sleep. And when you wake, whether in the morning light or the quiet of the night, may you feel calm, whole, and at peace. For now, dear one, let go. Rest. Sleep. Tonight, I'll guide you on a journey through a forest unlike any other. A forest lit by lanterns and threaded with dreams. Let's begin. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of an old winding path. The sky above is painted in deep twilight blues, where stars are just beginning to bloom. The air is cool and calm, with the faintest scent of lavender and moss. Before you is the entrance to the Whispering Woods, a place of peace, mystery, and memory. It's quiet here, except for the soft rustle of leaves and the distant song of night birds. You notice small lanterns floating just above the path. They flicker with a warm golden light. One by one, they gently guide the way forward. You take your first step. The ground beneath your feet is soft, blanketed in pine needles and old earth. It cushions each step, as though the forest itself is welcoming you. As you walk, you feel your shoulders soften. Your jaw relaxes. Even your thoughts begin to slow, like leaves drifting gently down a quiet stream. Every few steps, another lantern glows a little brighter, as if happy to see you. Their warm light wraps around you like a soft shawl. And with each step forward, you feel more at ease. To your right, you notice a small stream winding through the trees. It babbles quietly, like an old friend telling a soothing story. The water glistens in the lantern light, catching flashes of silver and gold. You pause for a moment. Listen to the stream. Hear how gently it moves, never in a rush. Always flowing, always soft. You take a deep breath in and let it go. The air smells of cedar, moonlight, and stillness. With every breath, you feel your heart slow, your mind soften. You continue walking. The forest begins to hum, a gentle ancient lullaby. Not from any one place, but from the woods themselves, as though the trees remember this ritual of rest. Up ahead, the path begins to widen. You come to a small clearing surrounded by tall, old trees. Their branches arch above like a cathedral open to the night sky. In the center of the clearing is a large stone circle, moss-covered and glowing faintly in the lantern light. You step into the circle and feel the hush settle even deeper around you. There is a soft bench here, carved from an old tree and worn smooth with time. You feel the strength of the wood beneath you, the stillness of the earth below. Above you, the stars shimmer like distant dreams. A breeze brushes through the trees, and with it comes a gentle hush, as though the forest is exhaling. You exhale too. And with that breath, your body relaxes even more. Any remaining tension begins to drift away like smoke in the night air. From the edge of the clearing, a soft light appears. It floats closer, then pauses beside you. It's a tiny lantern, no bigger than your palm. And inside it, a single glowing feather turns slowly, gently. This is your dream lantern. It knows your heart. It carries your peace, your quiet, your hopes for rest. The lantern begins to rise. It floats just above your head and begins to circle slowly, as if spinning a cocoon of light around you. You watch it mesmerized. Your eyelids grow heavy. Your breath is deep, effortless. A whisper seems to flow from the lantern. It's okay to rest. It's safe to sleep. You've arrived. And indeed, you feel that truth in your bones. You're safe. You're home in this forest of lanterns and dreams. The bench seems to soften beneath you. Your eyes close. The lantern's light wraps around your mind like a lullaby. And as you drift, you feel something familiar. A memory of a time when sleep was easy, when the world was quiet, when you were cradled in something much bigger than yourself. That feeling returns now. Held by the forest, held by the night, held by peace. In the distance, an owl sings, a lullaby in feathered tones. The stars blink slowly. The dream lantern hums. Your breath slows to match the rhythm of the night. In and out, like the tide, like a lullaby, like a dream. And now your body is weightless, floating in a sea of quiet, sailing gently through a sky of sleep. Nothing else is needed. There is nothing to do, nowhere to go. Only this moment. Only this stillness. Only this breath. And as your mind wanders gently and slowly into the softest of dreams, know that you are deeply safe. Know that you are deeply loved. Know that you are allowed to let go. You've done enough today. You've journeyed far enough. Now let sleep carry you the rest of the way. Into the heart of the whispering woods. Into the hush of the stars. Into the warmth of your lantern-lit dreams. Good night, dreamer. Rest well. Sleep deeply. I'll be here when you return. If this story brought you peace tonight, consider liking, subscribing, or leaving a gentle comment. It helps keep this cozy corner of YouTube glowing for others who need rest. It started the same way each evening, soft, unassuming, and oddly consistent. Just as I turned the front sign of Fern and Fable books to closed and reached for the latch, I'd see him, a small gray cat. He wasn't remarkable by feline standards. No bell collar or silky fur meant for magazine pages. Just smoke gray fur with a splash of white beneath the chin and eyes the color of old parchment. He never came close, never meowed or pawed. He simply sat, tucked neatly on the cobblestone edge across the street, barely a shadow in the fading light, watching. At first I didn't think much of it. A neighborhood stray, perhaps. But after the fourth night, then the fifth, a gentle curiosity began to thread its way into my evenings. Why always dusk? Why always the same spot? And why me? I never mentioned him to anyone, though on slow days I found myself glancing through the front window around sunset, wondering if he'd come. He always did. A quiet presence, like a punctuation mark closing the day. It was a Tuesday, gray in that slanted, sloshy way only April manages, when the rhythm shifted. The rain came sudden and hard, like the sky had been holding its breath all week and finally let go. I hadn't brought an umbrella, of course. I rarely did. Instead, I darted next door beneath the striped awning of Maribel's cafe and huddled, arms around my wrapped cardigan, watching puddles bloom across the street. That's when I saw him again. He didn't bolt from the downpour or mule in protest. He simply appeared, stepping out from wherever cats vanish to when the world gets loud. He shook once, just once, and settled beside me under the awning as though it were the most natural thing in the world. "Hey there," I murmured, voice soft over the hiss of rain on pavement. He blinked slowly, almost imperially, and tucked his paws beneath him. I could feel the warmth of his presence despite the cold at my back. We sat like that for a while, strangers at peace. I didn't reach out. I didn't need to. He wasn't there for affection, I sensed. He was there for being, for sharing the hush between raindrops, the comfort of not being entirely alone. I had never felt a presence so quiet and yet so loud in its own way. Somewhere behind us, Maribel was pulling stools onto tables, the clink of ceramic against wood filtering through the door. The wind tousled my damp curls across my cheeks. I glanced down at the cat again, and without quite knowing why, said aloud, "Whimsy." He looked at me. "That's what I'll call you," I said, more to the moment than to him. "Whimsy." As though in agreement, he gave the tiniest flick of his tail. That was the beginning of something I couldn't have put into words. Not then. I'd lost my sister Mira just 8 months before. Her laugh still echoed in the back hallways of my thoughts. Some days it caught me off guard, like walking into a room where music is playing only to find silence. We used to run the bookstore together, Mira and I. She had a terrible sense of alphabetization, but could recommend you a book that would make your soul feel seen. Now it was just me. just me and the creak of floorboards that sounded different without her. So maybe that's why Whimsy stayed. Why he came back again the next night, this time sitting closer, directly in front of the bookstore steps. I opened the door and stood there for a long moment, the chill of early spring brushing my arms. "You again," I said, smiling faintly. He blinked. I had brought a saucer of milk that evening, though I wasn't sure why. He didn't touch it, just looked at me, tail curled neatly around his paws. I left the saucer anyway. The next night I tried a small piece of fish wrapped in parchment, again untouched. He didn't want food. He wasn't hungry. He wanted... what? Company? Or perhaps he was simply there and it was I who needed a reason. Over time, our routine became a kind of sacred rhythm. Dusk, close the shop, look up. There he was. If the weather was good, I'd sit on the front steps with a book. If it rained, I'd head to the cafe awning, and Whimsy would follow or lead. It wasn't until a week later, during a lull in the drizzle, that I dared reach out my hand. Slowly, gently, letting my fingers hover just beside his ear. He leaned in, just enough to brush against me, just enough to say, "Okay, now you may." I don't know if I smiled or cried, maybe both. The contact was fleeting, but it filled some hollow space in me I hadn't realized was still aching. That night, I slept with the window cracked, hoping to hear rain. One evening, I brought a book outside, The Wind in the Willows, one of Mira's favorites. I began to read aloud, just a few pages. Whimsy sat beside me, eyes half-lidded, the way cats look when they're pretending not to care but actually listening intently. "It is a good story, isn't it?" I asked. He didn't answer, of course, but when I turned the page, he curled a little closer. There's a kind of magic in routine, I've learned, in noticing small things, in letting the world move around you while you remain still for just a while. Whimsy taught me that. Or maybe he reminded me. People began to notice. Mrs. Cleary from the florist asked if he was mine. The mailman commented on my bookstore cat. Children waved to him from across the street. But Whimsy wasn't mine. Not really. He was with me, which is different. Late one Friday, as I was locking up, the sky went lavender gold, the air thick with the promise of rain that never quite fell. I lingered on the stoop longer than usual, watching as Whimsy darted toward a shadowed alley near the cafe. Curious, I followed, slowly, keeping a respectful distance. He led me down a side street I rarely used, narrow and lined with ivy-choked fences. At the end of it sat a weathered bench beneath a flickering lamp-post, and on the bench, a woman. Older, her red coat soaked at the hem, shoulders trembling. Whimsy padded up to her without hesitation and leapt onto the bench beside her, curling into the crook of her arm like a patch of calm. She looked up, startled by me at first, but then her expression softened. "I'm sorry," I said quickly. "I didn't mean to intrude. I was just... He led me here." She nodded slowly, brushing at her cheek with the sleeve of her coat. "It's all right," she said, voice like dried leaves. "I just needed a moment. Everything's too quiet these days." I sat a little distance away, unsure what to say. Whimsy remained still, her anchor. She told me about her husband, about how he used to read aloud on park benches, and how the silence of missing someone is the loudest kind. I told her about Mira, about the cat that showed up like clockwork at twilight. We weren't strangers for long. Whimsy stayed between us the whole time, his eyes closed, his presence warm. When we parted, I watched as the woman whispered something into Whimsy's fur before standing and walking down the street, red coat glowing in the dusk. That night I stood at my window long after closing, watching fog roll in like spilled milk across the rooftops. Whimsy sat on the corner across the street, gazing up. He stayed a while longer than usual before disappearing into the mist. And I stayed a while longer too. It's funny how something as simple as a cat, one that doesn't even ask to be fed, can open a door you didn't realize was still locked. Grief, I think, is like fog. It settles, it wraps, it dulls the outlines of things. But if you wait long enough, if you sit with it, quiet and still, you start to see shapes again. Lamps glowing behind curtains, strangers with shared stories. And maybe even a gray cat who arrives just when you need reminding that the world still has whimsy left in it, that you still do. And every dusk, I now look forward to closing time, not as an ending, but a kind of beginning, a threshold between day and night, between loneliness and connection, between memory and hope. And often, waiting just across the street, is Whimsy. There's something about the way dusk touches the edges of things, makes the world feel softer, more honest. That's when Whimsy comes, always at the in-between. I used to think he was just my twilight companion, that perhaps he favored the scent of old pages and warm lamplight from my bookstore window. But I was wrong. Whimsy doesn't belong to me. He belongs to the hush between heartbeats, to the people who don't know they're lonely until silence wraps too tightly, to the pause before tears, to the unspoken ache. I learned that the day I followed him. It was after closing. The shop was quiet, a whisper of vanilla from the tea tin still hanging in the air. I had just flipped the sign when I saw him, not on the doorstep this time, but further down the sidewalk, tail curled, waiting. He didn't look back, just stood and walked. And so I followed. We passed the corner florist, shuttered for the night, and the bakery with its sweet breath of cinnamon still lingering. The town was wrapped in the hush of early evening. Whimsy turned down a narrow lane I never noticed before, half-shaded, littered with leaves that crackled like old letters beneath my boots. That's where I saw her. An older woman, red scarf fraying at the edges, sat alone on a bench beside a flickering lamp-post. Her shoulders were tight, her hands twisted around a worn handkerchief. She stared at the pavement like it had taken something from her. Whimsy leapt softly onto the bench beside her. No sound, just presence. The woman startled a little, looked down, then let out a sound between a laugh and a sob. Her hand moved to stroke his head, hesitant at first, then certain. I didn't mean to intrude, but I stepped closer. "He finds the saddest corners," I said gently. She looked up at me with eyes that had clearly known too many midnights. "He's yours?" "No," I said. "I think he just lets me see where he's needed." She nodded, like that made perfect sense. "My husband died 3 months ago. This bench, we used to meet here every Thursday after his jazz group rehearsed. He always brought a muffin, always the same, blueberry. I keep coming. I don't know why." I didn't know what to say. So I sat beside her. We listened to the wind rustle through the trees. Whimsy purred, a low, steady comfort. "I'm Luciana," I said after a while. "Diane." And that's how the journal began. The places Whimsy stayed. Entry 1. The bench beneath the flickering lamp. A woman grieving time. A bench holding memory. A cat who knew how to sit still long enough for the ache to breathe. Whimsy stayed until her shoulders lowered, until the space beside her didn't feel so empty. After that, I started carrying the little notebook with me. A slim navy thing with a leather string to tie it shut. I didn't write in it daily, only when he led me somewhere, only when the silence turned thick. The next time it was a Tuesday. Rain had come and gone, leaving the pavement slick and glowing. I was walking home with a loaf of walnut bread tucked under my arm, humming something forgettable. Whimsy appeared near the playground, curled at the base of the slide. A boy sat nearby, knees to chest, a mess of dark hair falling over his eyes. His backpack sagged beside him, and in his hands he folded a paper crane. Another lay by his feet, and another, at least a dozen. He didn't notice me at first, not until Whimsy stretched and settled against his legs. The boy didn't flinch, just kept folding, slower now. "They fly better when you make wishes," I said gently. He looked up, startled. "They don't really fly?" "No," I agreed, "but maybe they carry things." He stared at me, eyes rimmed red but dry. "Like what?" "Loneliness," I offered. "Questions, sometimes even hope." He considered that. "I don't think hope fits in paper. I've found it in stranger places," I smiled. We talked, just a little. His name was Max. His mom worked double shifts, and he hated going home to an apartment that echoed. Folding cranes helped. Whimsy chose a good spot tonight, I murmured later, as I watched Max walk away, one crane tucked carefully in his pocket. Entry 2. The slide and the cranes. A boy folding silence into wings. Paper birds waiting on wet pavement. A cat who doesn't ask questions, just listens. Whimsy stayed until the boy folded a crane and gave it a name. The days moved quietly after that. Whimsy didn't always lead. Sometimes he just returned to the bookstore stoop, letting the routine of dusk settle in. But I began watching people more closely, especially the ones who moved like ghosts in their own skin. And then came the violinist. It was late on a Thursday. A chilly wind skimmed through town, sending scarves fluttering and shop signs creaking. I was walking toward the corner market for herbs when I heard it, a high, trembling note that halted mid-air, like breath caught in a throat. I turned and saw him, a young man, violin tucked beneath his chin, bow frozen mid-stroke. His eyes squeezed shut. The rest of him held still as stone. Beside him, curled against the open violin case, was Whimsy. I walked slowly, not wanting to interrupt whatever was happening. "He doesn't always come," the man said, not opening his eyes. "No? Only when I'm about to give up." I didn't speak. The music returned, a fragile line of sound, threadbare but steady. I sat on the curb across from him and listened. When he finished, he opened his eyes. They were the pale gray of early fog. "I used to play for her," he said. "Your partner?" "My sister." He didn't explain more. He didn't have to. Entry 3, the bow that hesitated. A man and his music paused in grief. A violin afraid to speak again. A cat in a velvet case, offering only stillness. Whimsy stayed until the music remembered how to breathe. The journal filled slowly, but meaningfully. I kept it beside the register, sometimes tucked under the teapot I never drank from, but loved to refill. And somewhere along the way, I changed. I used to keep my eyes down, on books, on receipts, on to-do lists. But now I watched the world, not for drama or spectacle, but for the quiet shimmers, the trembles beneath someone's smile, the way a person's hand hesitated before reaching for a doorknob. I learned that need doesn't always look like desperation. Sometimes it's in the stillness. Sometimes it's in the way someone lingers outside the bookstore before deciding not to come in. One evening I followed Whimsy to the train station. It's not far, just past the bakery, across from the rose mural that's faded now but still beautiful. The platform was mostly empty, just a handful of travelers and a woman in a bright orange coat. She was pacing, clutching a boarding pass like it might disappear. Whimsy leapt onto the bench behind her. I sat 2 spaces away. "I'm not sure I'm going," she said without prompting. Her voice was cracked with fatigue. I didn't ask where. It didn't matter. I packed everything, quit my job, told my mother I'd finally start over, and now I can't breathe. Whimsy let out a single sharp meow. She looked down at him. "And this one?" He just sat and stared at me like he knows something. "He probably does," I said softly. "He's good at that." "I'm scared," she whispered. "What if I go and nothing changes? What if I stay and everything does?" "You'll still be you," I said, "wherever you are." She nodded. "Then maybe that's enough." She didn't board the train. Not that night. She sat until the lights dimmed and the silence felt safe again. Entry 4. The platform before the leap. A woman with a ticket and trembling hands. A cat who watches the places people unravel. Whimsy stayed until her heart beat steadier than the train's rhythm. I could go on. There's the man with the broken pocket watch who sat outside the repair shop, weeping into his hands. The teenager sketching feathers on napkins at the corner cafe. The new mother who hadn't slept in days and smiled for the first time when Whimsy curled at her feet. He found them all, and I found them through him. I used to think stories only lived in pages, pressed between ink and binding, but I was wrong. Stories are everywhere, in strangers, in cracks, in the way a person's eyes soften when someone simply sees them. Now, the journal lives on the front counter of my bookstore. I labeled it in silver ink. The places Whimsy stayed. Some customers flip through it. Some add notes of their own, moments they've had with him. Some just smile and say, "That gray cat, he found me once." And I believe them, because Whimsy doesn't belong to me. He belongs to the hush before healing, to the space made sacred by presence, to the ones who think no one notices. Entry 5. The bookstore at dusk. A cat with twilight in his fur. A woman who learned to listen. A shop where silence is welcomed and stories are tended like tea. Whimsy still comes every evening. Not for me, but for the ones who need to be found. And I'll be there. Notebook open, heart listening. It was the first true cold of the season, the kind that tapped against the windows and slipped through the seams like breath from another world. I'd just finished shelving a box of donated poetry, worn volumes with spines softened by time, when I noticed him again. Whimsy. He was curled up on the doormat outside the bookshop, tail wrapped snug around his body like a ribbon. He didn't look up as I locked the door, just blinked slowly when I crouched to meet him eye to eye. He'd begun to feel less like a stray and more like something fated, a presence that arrived precisely when needed and never a moment before. "You're not staying out in this cold, are you?" I asked softly. His ears twitched at my voice, but he didn't move. I reached out and scratched behind them gently. "Come on, then." I opened the apartment door, just above the bookstore, and waited. He didn't hesitate. Not even a flicker of caution. Whimsy walked inside like he'd always belonged, trailing a faint scent of damp leaves and something older, something like parchment and rain. I laid out a folded fleece blanket beside the heater, unsure if cats even liked heaters, and watched as he made 3 slow circles before settling in. His purring began almost immediately, a low, steady hum that filled the silence. There was something comforting in the way he made himself at home. I didn't feel the usual twitch of nervousness that came with change. It was as though his being here restored some hidden balance I hadn't realized I'd lost. After washing my hands, I steeped a cup of chamomile and sat on the edge of the couch, journal in hand. The one I'd started a few weeks back, the places Whimsy stayed, now had 12 entries. Small noticings, fleeting encounters, glimpses of people whose lives momentarily brushed against mine, drawn together by the silent presence of this cat. Tonight I flipped to a blank page and hesitated. "Where did you stay today?" I asked aloud. Whimsy didn't answer, but then again he never had to. That night something changed. Sleep came quickly, too quickly, as though I'd walked through a doorway into another time. And when the dream began, I wasn't surprised. My sister stood by the fountain in Florence, the same one we'd visited on our last trip together, our arms linked, laughter echoing against cobblestone. But this time there was no ache in my chest, no lump in my throat. She wore the lemon-yellow dress she'd loved, the one with the little embroidered sunflowers. Her face was soft with joy. "You brought a cat into your home," she said teasingly, brushing a curl from her brow. "I did," I whispered in return, though my lips didn't move. "I'm proud of you, Luce, for letting something in." And then she kissed my cheek, light as fog. Her touch lingered long after I woke. Morning unfurled with the scent of cinnamon and wet earth. It had rained sometime in the early hours, and the windows were misted with breath. Whimsy was still curled in the same spot, though his eyes blinked open the moment I stirred. The kettle hissed to life. I padded to the mailbox while the water boiled, wrapped in a shawl and slippers. I wasn't expecting anything, not bills, not catalogs. But there it was, a letter, creamy envelope, hand-addressed, with the postmark from Florence. My heart stilled. "Dear Luciana, I walked past the Piazza della Signoria yesterday and thought of you. You and your sister, arms linked, devouring gelato like it held the secrets of the universe. There's a quiet apartment available above a tiny bindery near Via dei Neri. I thought of your dream to write, to translate, to sit near open windows with ink-stained fingers, just in case that dream still flickers. I miss our long afternoons of coffee and daydreams. Warmly, Francesca." My fingers traced the edge of the paper as if memory lived in the margins. Francesca, steady, ever romantic Francesca, had always known how to write between the lines, how to speak to the quiet parts of me I kept tucked away. The idea of Florence stirred something beneath my ribs. Not pain, not yet longing, just movement, like a thread being gently tugged. The day passed slowly, the way Sundays do. I opened the shop for a few hours, tucked a few poetry books into brown paper bags for regulars, made small talk over the counter while Whimsy dozed on the windowsill. But my mind was elsewhere. I found myself lingering on every detail. My chipped mug, the creaky stair rail, the faint scent of sandalwood from the old wooden shelves. I wondered, had this chapter run its course, or was I still in the middle of its turning? That evening I sat cross-legged on the floor with Whimsy pressed against my thigh. The letter from Florence lay open on the table beside us. "I used to dream in Italian," I murmured. "Did you know that?" Whimsy blinked, slow and deliberate. I thought maybe that part of me had disappeared. The dreaming part. But last night, my voice trailed off. I didn't need to explain. Later, I pulled down a faded shoebox from the highest shelf in the hall closet. Inside were postcards, photographs, and a bundle of linen notebooks wrapped in ribbon. I hadn't opened them in years, not since my sister's funeral. They still smelled like lavender and sun. I thumbed through pages filled with sketches of Florence, cafe names, fragments of poems, half-finished ideas for books I never wrote. We had called it the someday box. Someday we'd move. Someday we'd write. Someday we'd chase the lives we imagined. But life, I'd learned, wasn't always kind to some days. And yet, Whimsy stayed, curled against me every night. His presence was a kind of soft companionship I hadn't realized I needed, a balm against the silence. He didn't ask anything of me, didn't need answers, just stayed, like warmth waiting patiently for permission to return. In the mornings, I began to read from our journals again, hers and mine. I found one entry dated exactly a year before she passed. "Luciana is afraid to leap, but I know she'll fly if she does. Maybe she just needs a nudge from something unexpected." I closed the notebook and exhaled. Something unexpected, like a cat with twilight in his fur. Over the following week, I watched my own life with quiet curiosity. I scribbled in the places Whimsy stayed, now full of notes not just about strangers but about myself. The place where Whimsy sat while I wept over my sister's last letter. The place he pressed his paw into my journal like a stamp of approval. The place he curled around the base of my suitcase as if weighing its purpose. Because yes, I'd pulled it from the closet. The suitcase. The one I hadn't touched since the funeral. I dusted it off without fully understanding why, only that it felt right. One afternoon, a customer I barely knew lingered at the counter. "You seem lighter lately," she said, bagging her books. I smiled. "I think something's shifting. Spring does that to people. It's not spring yet." She tilted her head, thoughtful. "Maybe it's spring in your heart." That night I dreamed of Florence again. This time I stood at the balcony of the imagined apartment Francesca had mentioned. I looked down at the street below, sun-washed stone, a boy playing violin, two old men arguing over espresso. Behind me, my sister laughed. "You always said you'd come back. Maybe I will." "No," she said gently. "Maybe you already are." I turned, but she was gone. Only Whimsy sat on the railing, tail flicking, waiting. In the days that followed, I didn't rush. I didn't decide. I simply allowed. Allowed the dreaming. Allowed the sadness. Allowed the maybe. I began writing letters to Francesca, long ones. Some I sent, some I didn't. I started rewriting an old story I'd once drafted in a Florence cafe. I moved the plants to sunnier spots and let the light in. I offered the bookstore assistant more hours, and I told Whimsy everything, even the parts that hurt. Then one evening, while organizing the back room, I found an envelope I didn't remember tucking away. It wasn't dated, only labeled in my sister's handwriting, for the day she lets the cat inside. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a simple note. Luciana, let yourself live again. I'll meet you in the stories you write, in the sun that spills on old stone, in the quiet places where whimsy lingers. Don't wait for someday. Love always, M. I didn't cry. Not right away. I pressed the letter to my heart and whispered, okay. That night, I packed the suitcase for real. Not everything, just the notebooks, a few favorite books, the lemon dress, the postcards, and a blanket for Whimsy, though I had no idea if cats even like to travel. He watched me the whole time, blinking slowly, as if he'd been waiting for this moment, as if he'd known all along. I leave in a week. The apartment in Florence is still available. Francesca will meet me at the train station with espresso and stories. I don't know if it's forever, I don't even know if it's long, but it's forward. Tonight, Whimsy sleeps beside me on the windowsill. The bookstore glows gently below us. The sky is a deep plum, stars softening into view. Somewhere inside me, a door has opened, and light is filtering through. And for the first time in a long, long time, I feel ready to walk through. I didn't know how quiet the world had become until Whimsy stopped showing up. It started with an ordinary morning, the kind with soft light peeking through the clouds and a chill in the air that whispered promises of coffee and stories. I brewed my usual cup, left the back door of the shop slightly ajar like I always did, just in case Whimsy wanted to sneak in early. I even set out a small dish of water and one of those salmon treats I'd learned he loved. But he didn't come. Not that day. Not the next. Not the one after that. For 3 nights in a row, I lingered after closing, brushing imaginary dust from the display table, reorganizing books that didn't need rearranging, pretending I wasn't listening for soft paws or the whisper of a tail brushing past the door. On the 4th night, I locked the door early. I told myself it was just a cat who didn't belong to me, a cat who never wore a collar, never meowed for food, never asked to stay. But that night, my dreams felt hollow. I woke with my arms curled around nothing, like I had been reaching for warmth that never arrived. It was only by chance that I saw him again. I was walking home from the market, my bag heavier than usual with plums and thyme and a loaf of sourdough I didn't remember picking up. The kind of distracted shopping you do when your mind's not really inside your body. That was when I saw the flicker of gray in the window across the street. 2nd floor, wide sill, ivy curling along the brick frame. Whimsy, curled like fog, content, his eyes half-lidded, and beside him, a girl. She looked about 16, curled in a sweater too big for her, legs drawn up beneath her like she was trying to disappear into the fabric. Her fingers moved slowly across a sketch pad, as if the act of drawing something from within helped her stay together. I stood on the sidewalk like a character in someone else's novel, too stunned to move. I should have been relieved. He was safe, not lost, not hurt. But the truth was more complicated. I felt replaced, or maybe forgotten. And yet, there was something about the girl. Not just sadness, something familiar, a stillness I recognized. It lived in her posture, in the weight of her shoulders, the way she tilted her head toward Whimsy like she was listening for something quiet, something only he could hear. She came to the bookstore 3 days later. I'd just finished putting up a new window display. Autumn leaves pressed between glass panes, a stack of poetry collections arranged like a campfire, a little placard that read, "What we carry, we read." The bell jingled above the door, and when I turned, there she was. Her hair was pulled back into a loose braid, wisps escaping to frame her face. Her boots were scuffed, and the sleeves of her sweatshirt were fraying at the ends. But her eyes were wide, searching, as if walking in had been an act of bravery. "Hi," I said, gentler than usual. "Looking for anything in particular?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "I'm not sure. I felt like coming in." I nodded, not asking more. "Some places call you." I knew that well. She wandered slowly, fingers brushing spines, pausing in front of the shelf where I kept my favorites. Rilke, Plath, Mary Oliver. She picked up The Year of Magical Thinking, cradled it in her palms for a moment, then set it down. "Can I sit?" she asked, gesturing toward the velvet armchair near the back. It had belonged to my sister once, Elena's reading chair from college, threadbare but still firm. "Of course," I said. "Would you like some tea?" She blinked at me like I'd offered something impossible. "Okay." I brewed chamomile with a sprig of lavender, the way I always did when someone looked like they needed softness. When I brought it over, she was sketching again, a cat. Not a perfect likeness, but close. Whimsy stretched out mid-yawn, content and wild and unknowable. "That's him," I said quietly. She looked up. "You know him?" "I do," I said. Or maybe he knew me first. The smile she gave me was small but real, the kind that felt like a crack in winter ice, the start of thaw. Her name was Maris. Over the next few weeks she came by often, not every day, but often enough that I began expecting her. She never stayed long, and she never bought anything. But she always lingered near the same shelves, always sketched quietly, always accepted tea if I offered it. She never asked about Whimsy, and I never asked what brought her to my door. But sometimes in the quiet hum between us, I felt like we both knew. Once she came in after a rainstorm. Her hair was damp, her eyes red. "I didn't cry," she said out of nowhere. "Not really, just a little. My mom thinks it's just a phase, but it's not. It's heavier than that. It's like I don't know who I am when it gets dark out." I didn't try to fix it. I just handed her a towel and made her tea. "I used to feel that way," I said. "Still do sometimes. After my sister died, dusk felt unbearable, like the world folded in on itself." "What did you do?" she whispered. "I named a cat," I said, and she laughed just a little. And then I started watching what he watched. People, moments, silences. "That doesn't sound like much." "It was," I said. "It still is." I began keeping a second chair beside my desk. She never asked to sit there, but one day she did. She brought a sketch of the bookstore with golden light spilling from the windows and a tiny gray cat in the doorway. She gave it to me without ceremony, and I framed it that same night. On the back, she had written in pencil, "Sometimes light returns in small ways." I didn't cry when I read it, but I felt something open. Whimsy still didn't return to me. I passed his window often. Sometimes he was there, sometimes not. I'd glance up and see him stretched like fog, guarding the girl I'd come to care for. I never knocked. I never called out. He wasn't mine to summon. But now it didn't feel like loss. It felt like sharing. Whimsy had found her when she needed him, just like he found me once. Maybe that was his gift. Not to stay, but to arrive when silence needed company. One afternoon I asked Maris if she'd help me rearrange the poetry shelf. She grinned. "You trust me with the good stuff?" "I trust you with more than that." We worked in quiet, stacking books by color instead of author, letting the order be instinctive rather than alphabetical. She stopped on a slim volume by Ada Lyman and read a passage aloud. The ache of it, the joyful ache of it. We were born to love like this, fragmented and ever-reaching. She paused. "Isn't that beautiful?" "Yes," I said. "It is." Later that evening, after she left, I sat on the steps outside the shop. The sun was setting in strokes of coral and violet, the kind of sky that makes you believe in second chances. I closed my eyes and listened to the wind, to the leaves scratching the sidewalk, to the far-off laughter of children. I didn't need Whimsy beside me to feel full. He had given me something that stayed. Through his quiet companionship, I had learned to see again, to offer warmth instead of just longing for it, to reach instead of waiting. Maris had found her way to me, not because of what I offered, but because something within her called out. I just happened to be the place where that call was answered. A week later, I walked past his window again. It was empty. No cat, no girl. My heart stuttered until I looked down the street and saw Maris walking toward the shop, sketchpad in hand, eyes brighter than I'd ever seen them. "I have something for you," she said as she entered. From her bag, she pulled a small envelope. Inside was a letter. Dear Luciana, thank you for letting me sit in your bookstore like I belonged there. Thank you for letting the silence be okay. I'm moving in with my aunt for a while. She has a garden and a porch swing and room for all the things I thought I lost. Whimsy left this morning. I think he's on his way somewhere else, but I know he'll be back. Wherever someone needs a soft shadow and a steady gaze. You gave me light when I didn't know I needed it. Now I'll try to do the same. Love, Maris. That night I left the door cracked open again, just in case. Not for Whimsy, though I would always welcome him, but for whoever might come next. Someone looking for silence, for stories, for a seat by the window and a cup of tea that tastes like healing. And as I turned out the lights, I whispered into the dusk, thank you, Whimsy. I'll keep the warmth going. And I did. And I will. It started with the soft sound of cardboard shifting, barely more than a whisper in the quiet of my closet. I hadn't meant to find anything. I'd been hunting for an old sweater, the one with the pine green stitching along the cuffs that reminded me of winters in Florence. But instead, tucked behind a pair of boots I hadn't worn since last fall, I saw it. A shoebox, worn at the corners, wrapped once with a faded yellow ribbon I knew too well. Florence had always tied things in ribbons, even grocery lists. She said string cut too sharply and tape felt final. But ribbons could be undone, like stories that weren't finished yet. My breath caught before I even touched it. I knew instinctively that this wasn't just a forgotten box of mementos. This was something she'd meant to show me, and hadn't. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid. Letters, dozens of them, maybe more, all in her looping script. Some in envelopes, some loose and folded, most addressed simply, Luciana. A few had little sketches in the corners, flowers, stars. One had a tiny coffee mug steaming beside the word Monday. I pressed my thumb into that doodle, smiling without meaning to. I sat cross-legged on the closet floor and began to read. The first was dated a month after she moved away for school. I miss your terrible coffee, it began, and your tendency to hum off-key while shelving books. I laughed, an actual laugh, full and sudden. It echoed oddly in the small closet space. But the letter didn't stay light. She talked about loneliness, about learning to cook for one, and about how she kept picturing me under that amber glow of the bookshop lights, head bent over a mystery novel. There's comfort in imagining you there, she wrote, like a lighthouse I can steer toward when I get a little lost. The next letter was different. Dated nearly 2 years later, the tone had shifted, wiser, more knowing. Luke, she wrote, I know you still carry things too tightly. I see it even across the miles. Please don't hold grief like a badge. Let it rest. Let yourself rest. They weren't all sad. One was entirely about a pigeon that had stolen her sandwich in the park. Another included a list of 10 things that made her laugh that week. Number 4. A man walking 5 dogs who all wore raincoats except him. Number 8. The fact that I tried to bake cookies and created something that could double as masonry. She had always been terrible in the kitchen. There was one with pressed petals inside it, lilac, I think. A reminder of a childhood summer where we'd made crowns from wildflowers and declared our backyard a secret queendom. You were the kind queen, she'd written, and I was the dragon who never stayed put. And then the final letter. It wasn't dated. No envelope, just a single page. A little smudged on one corner, like maybe she'd wept or spilled something, knowing her. Luciana, it began, and then paused. No comma, no breath, just my name alone on the first line. It read like she'd needed a moment to gather herself before going on. I don't know when you'll find this. Maybe after I'm gone. Maybe never. But if you do, I want you to know something I never found the courage to say aloud. I've always known how deeply you feel. And I've always feared it would turn into a cage. You carry love the way some people carry grief, with reverence and silence. But you deserve more than memory. You deserve laughter and sunlight and messy, real days filled with hope. If you're reading this, I hope you're okay. I hope you've let someone in, maybe a friend, maybe just a cat who thinks you're theirs. I hope you've written poems or danced barefoot in the apartment. I hope you've stopped trying to be so careful with everything. I hope you've chosen joy, not out of guilt or out of loss, but because you want to, because life waited for you and you decided to meet it. There was no signature. She knew I'd know it was her. I don't remember standing up or carrying the box to the living room, but I must have. Because the next thing I knew, I was seated on the floor beside my coffee table, letters fanned out like soft paper wings across the rug. A candle flickered beside me, its wax forming a small golden lake. I wasn't crying. I expected to, but I wasn't. Instead, something was rising in me, something quieter but steadier, like roots stretching, like light sifting through a curtain. I reached for my journal. It still sat where it always did, on the corner of the table, tucked beneath a stack of bookmarked novels and the little ceramic dish that held my grandmother's ring. I pulled it out, flipped past pages of scattered thoughts, dream fragments, notes about Whimsy's wanderings, and then paused. There, on the latest page, was a paw print, faint, smudged, dusty gray, Whimsy. I turned slowly, and there he was, perched on the windowsill, silhouetted against the night, tail curled neatly beside him like punctuation. His eyes caught mine, steady, unreadable, knowing. He leapt down, landed soundlessly, and walked over to me without hesitation. When he curled atop my journal, his body warm and real and impossibly still, I let out the breath I hadn't realized I was holding. You came back, I whispered. He blinked slowly, then rested his chin on the cover of the journal like a sleepy seal. I touched his fur gently. Maybe Florence had been right. Maybe Whimsy was the someone I let in. The next morning, the world looked ordinary again, but in that shimmering way it sometimes does when you've quietly shifted. The air smelled like possibility. I brewed coffee and didn't grimace when it tasted a little burnt. Whimsy sat by the door, tail flicking like he had somewhere in mind. I followed him. Down the steps, past the bookstore, and through the quiet lane where the sun cast soft golden slants across brick and ivy. He trotted with purpose, pausing only once at the bakery window where a display of cinnamon rolls made me promise we'd return. He led me to the bench, the same one where I'd seen the girl, the one he'd comforted, curled beside like he had belonged to her all along. I'd since learned her name, Marin. She had started stopping by the bookshop more often, asking tentative questions about poetry, leaving behind folded napkins scribbled with her own verses. She was waiting there now, holding a paper cup of something warm, her hair tucked into a blue knit cap. She looked up, surprised, but not startled, when I arrived. "He came back to you," she said, voice quiet. I nodded. "I think he was never really gone." She smiled, soft. "Do you ever feel like he knows more than we do?" "All the time." We sat in silence for a while, Whimsy perched between us like a small guardian. Then I told her. About the letters. Not all the details, not yet, but enough. Her eyes didn't look away. She listened like she was trying to understand something beneath the words. "I think she wanted me to remember who I was before I started folding into grief," I said. "I think I'm ready to try." "To unfold," Marin said gently. I nodded. That evening I wrote Florence back, a letter long and winding. I wrote it with a favorite pen and my best handwriting, as if it mattered. Maybe it didn't. Maybe it mattered only because I was doing it, because I needed to. I told her about Whimsy, about Marin, about the dreams I was starting to have again, dreams with color and curiosity instead of gray static. I told her about the new poetry shelf I'd added to the store, and how I'd rearranged the windows to let in more light. And I told her I wasn't afraid anymore, not of forgetting, and not of remembering. At the end, I added, "I'm going to choose joy, not as a substitute for you, but as something you'd want to see blooming in me." I folded the letter, tied it with a yellow ribbon, and placed it inside the same box. Some stories waited, and some could begin again. That night I dreamed of Florence. She wasn't distant or silent or caught in a memory I couldn't hold. She was laughing, standing barefoot on a beach I didn't recognize, hair tangled by salt and wind, holding up a conch shell like it was a trophy. "I knew you'd find them," she said. And I did. Not just the letters, but the part of me that could still reach for joy. Not to fill the loss, but to light something new. Whimsy was still curled on the journal when I woke. The morning light filtered in like soft promise. I looked at him and whispered, "Let's begin again." He didn't move, but I swear I saw his tail twitch, like punctuation, like yes. I packed slowly, as if each item carried the weight of memory rather than purpose. The books, dog-eared and coffee-stained, the candle that smelled faintly of cedar and something softer, jasmine maybe, the cracked mug Florence once said made tea taste like stories. I wrapped each one in newspaper, paused after sealing each box, and let the quiet of the apartment settle around me like snowfall. I wasn't sure where I would go, just that I was supposed to go. I told myself it was time to let go of this place, of what it had held and what it had lost. Time to start again, somewhere with brighter weather, fewer ghosts, and no stray cats curling into the corners of my heart. Whimsy sat on top of the last packed box, tail flicking as if guarding it, or judging my decision. "You can't come with me," I said, not unkindly. "You belong to the dusk, and this street." He blinked at me, unbothered. I slid the key from the hook by the door, the one Florence and I had always left there so we'd never lose it. My fingers hesitated around its familiar brass warmth. I closed my hand around it, then opened the door and stopped. The sky was watercolor, peach and lavender with brushstrokes of gold, one of those soft summer evenings that feels like a held breath. I stepped out and felt the hush of the town around me, like it too was listening. I didn't plan to walk through town, but my feet seemed to choose the direction without consulting me. At the corner bench, I saw her. The woman in the red coat. Her coat was folded neatly beside her now, her face brighter than I remembered. She was knitting, something soft and blue, and when she looked up, she smiled. "You," she said warmly, "you and that cat." Whimsy padded forward before I could respond, hopping onto the bench beside her, just as he had that first evening. She reached out and stroked his back with practiced affection. "He still visits, you know, usually when I'm missing Richard more than I want to admit." My throat caught. "I'm glad," I said softly. "You leaving?" "I was," I admitted. "I thought maybe it was time." She studied me. "Sometimes leaving is a way of staying if it brings you back clearer." I didn't quite understand, but I nodded anyway. Whimsy leapt down, trotting ahead. I followed. At the park, the boy with the paper crane sat with a small group of children. They were folding colorful squares, greens, blues, a bright coral pink. He looked up and waved a little sheepishly. "Hi, Luciana." "You remembered my name," I said, surprised. He grinned. "You and Whimsy came when I really needed someone. I didn't forget that." A younger girl beside him held up a bird with crooked wings. "It's a sleepy crane," she announced. I smiled. "The best kind." The musician was next, sitting at the edge of the fountain, plucking quiet notes from a travel-worn guitar. I hadn't heard him play since that evening Whimsy found him frozen in fear. Now music flowed like water. He gave a small nod as I passed. "The bookstore's still open?" "For now," I said. "Good. I still owe you a tune." The last person I saw was the girl, the one who'd followed Whimsy into my shop and into something quieter than pain. She sat on the bookstore steps with a sketchbook on her knees. She looked up, her eyes steadier than before. "I drew this," she said, holding up the sketchbook, "of you and Whimsy. It's not finished yet." I looked at the pencil strokes, soft lines tracing Whimsy curled in the windowsill, my own figure tucked into an armchair, the bookstore glowing behind us like a memory you could step into. I didn't know what to say. "You made a space for people to feel," she said. "That matters." Whimsy rubbed against her leg, then turned toward the door and sat beside it, waiting, as if to say, "There's more to do." I unpacked slowly,